Welcome to Leadership Bites with myself, your host, Guy Bloom. This is a leadership podcast where I have conversations with colleagues, I chat with guests, and sometimes there'll be just me talking. You can connect with me at livingbrave.com, and when you enjoy the episode, subscribe and please tell everyone. So, Jon, absolutely fantastic to have you on this episode of Leadership Bites. Welcome.
Thank you very much for inviting me, Guy.
Well, I've been looking forward to this, though actually, if you listen to the 120 episodes that I've done, I actually say on every single one of them, I'm really excited to have you on. Everybody I have on is so fantastic. So I do know who you are, of course, and Jon, it'd be great if you would just introduce yourself to the audience.
My name is Jon Riordan, and my current role is chairman of an organisation called Grow Remote, which is based in Ireland, which focuses on remote work. But let me reverse, and I'll come back to that in a second. About 22 years ago, I was the VP of Sales and Marketing at Virgin Atlantic Airways in the US. Post 9/11, the market was upside down. All the airlines were laying people off because they needed to. There was an enormous cost crunch, for want of a better word, and everybody needed a way to do things differently. You also had technology coming in. You had e-ticketing and a whole variety of other things. Like, some of your listeners will remember the days when you used to have to call an airline within 72 hours of the return flight to say that you were taking the return flight. I mean, there was so much BS in the system. That required people in contact centers making calls. So that was beginning to get shaken out of the business. So we needed to change the business model. And I fortuitously was sitting with a group of people at a Boston Red Sox game, and the conversation came around to customer service, and there was quite a number of people with a customer service background. And somebody jokingly said, "Oh, you're not going to believe it. I just got a phone call from a company that has a bunch of people working from home." And everybody burst out laughing, and all the jokes came on about remote shirking and sitting around in your bunny slippers and watching Oprah Winfrey and drinking cups of tea all day long. And so that was fine. And there was something about the conversation, and I laughed along like an idiot. I laughed along with everybody else. Then I got into my car and I started driving back down to Connecticut. And on the way down, I realized that the next 2 days, I actually had taken time out of the office, and I had one day devoted to doing the annual budget for the following year, and I had one day to doing all the reviews. And I was doing it from home. And why was I doing it from home? Before I ever came across the word, probably 10 years before I came across the word, I had already worked out that the best thing for me to do deep work was to actually closet myself away at home and actually do it. So in the course of that kind of road to Damascus moment, I realized there's something to this remote work thing. And that particular day, that particular conversation pretty much changed the nature of the next 20 odd years for me. Roll the clock forward a little bit. Within about a year or so, I had introduced this remote work concept to Virgin Atlantic Airways. And over time, we brought the numbers in the call center down, and we brought the number of people working from home up. And that happened relatively quickly, changed the whole cost dynamics of the business. And within about a year or so, a little company out in Cupertino in California called Apple came knocking on the door. They were looking for something. They were looking for a scalable element to their customer service organization. I was too stupid to realize that this was about a year and a half before the iPhone was launched. I wasn't versed enough in the Apple ecosystem to work out that I was a pawn in this whole thing. And it took me about a year into the project to realize, there is something very, very large coming. So I was brought in to build up an infrastructure upon which they could scale a customer service organization from 0 to 1,000 people at the flick of a switch. And you can't do that with people in a bricks and mortar concrete box somewhere. It needs to be done at home where you don't have that infrastructural cost. So that was kind of the second validation that remote work was afoot and was coming strongly. After that, I spent some time with the company that we had outsourced to at both Virgin Atlantic and Apple. I went and joined them for a couple of years. Then Apple came knocking again, and I moved back to Ireland, which is where I'm from originally, and worked for Apple for about 7 years, running their customer service organization in Europe. And then I got a phone call from a Canadian software company called Shopify, who I'd never heard of. And I kept on referring to them as Spotify in the original discussion, which I got reminded of on many occasions by the recruiter subsequently. But he had me at the opening line. He said, "You're probably not interested in this because it's a 100% remote position." Boom. He had me at yes, or he had me at that line, should I say. So I spent 5 years at Shopify, and the beauty of Shopify was it brought me back to a world that was fully remote. So when I joined Shopify, there were about 110 people based in Ireland, all of whom were remote. And by the time I left in November 2021, there were over 800 people, no office, fully remote. So that was kind of that's my journey to here. And it started with a conversation where I sniggered along with a bunch of other people at this silly concept of remote work to a world now where that's the stuff that's in there 24/7 that keeps me going.
You see, John, I think this is fantastic because I think many people have an idea, but I had this idea about chopsticks when I was at Wagamama's, and I thought, and there's a soup, and I thought, why don't the chopsticks have a hole in the middle so they can be a straw as well as chopsticks? Now, I think there's a market there for you and me to go and capitalise on because it's fantastic. I've got a separate spoon and I've got chopsticks, but no. So I've got the idea, and I've been discussing this idea for about 20 years. But there's a big difference between having a laugh and a giggle and a fantastic idea and then going, do you know what I'm going to do? I'm actually going to make some goddamn chopsticks with a hole in the middle and see what goes on. So there was the laugh, but you manifested it. You turned it into something.
Well, there's actually a very interesting piece, which I don't usually kind of tell in the story, was that as I was driving back down from Connecticut, or from Boston back to my home in Connecticut, I kept on thinking that, this is the right thing to do. So I knew the person I knew the individual who had mentioned this, who had mentioned that they'd been contacted by a company that did this. So I said, okay, I'll give her a call tomorrow. So I did. I then called her to get the name of the company and to get the name of the salesperson. I then called the company and didn't realize that. So I called and left a voicemail. The salesperson never called me back. I called a second time. They never called me back. I called a third time and I got no response. I thought, that's really bizarre. About 10 days later, somebody was clearing out the voicemail box of a salesperson who had left the organization, got this message from me and said, if you're still willing to talk, I'll be on your doorstep in Connecticut tomorrow. So I actually chased down the opportunity because it just was nagging me. It just kept on nagging and nagging and nagging. And I suppose the life lesson that I learned in that one was, if it's that good an idea that it's front of mind on a consistent basis, don't give up.
And I know this may be a bit of a $64,000 question, but when you had the idea and then you had to bring it to the world, what was that? Was that reaction one of, well, actually, John, you carry enough weight that we will listen? Or was it, this actually took you, like the Dyson story, it took a while to get people to believe that there could be such a thing as a bagless vacuum cleaner?
Well, that's a really, really interesting question because it took two things. It took a little bit of doggedness on my behalf. It took the trust of my boss at the time. And it took an organization like Virgin where you could actually come up with a batshit crazy idea and you had a fair chance of being backed. So, it was an organization that encouraged innovation. And I don't think this proposition had been brought before. And I could see people looking around going, I don't quite get it, but he seems to have done a lot of work on it. you know what, there don't seem to be too many other great ideas going around right now. We'll back you to do... So I got backed to do a trial, and I knew the minute I got back to do a trial, I was like, this is going to absolutely knock it out of the park. And it did.
So before we get into other things, because we're not going to talk about process and procedures, the one thing, as I work in leadership development, I work with senior teams and organizations, and culture is a constant topic. And some people would probably say, guys, hard enough to have a culture with people that you can actually see, let alone ones that you can't. So when you say an organization like Shopify says, hey, we're going to run the whole thing in essence remotely, is it a redefining of culture, or is it just a different set of skills? What is it that actually says it's culture, Jim, but just not as you know it?
It really is culture, but a different skill set. It really is. So I'm just going to give you two examples of onboarding. So when I onboarded at Virgin Atlantic in probably 1999, I remember going through a kind of a 2 or 3 day shadowing with a few people, and here I am, and they were very senior people at Virgin, and here I am all these years later. I actually don't really remember who I did the shadowing with. Roll the clock forward, when I onboarded at Shopify, I chose to do the onboarding with a frontline customer support class. So I did 6 weeks embedded in a frontline customer service role, and to this day, I remember probably 11 of the 12. I'm sure if I sat down, I'd remember all 12 people in the class. So what does that say to me is that what it said to me at the time was that you can really, really get to know people online when that's your universe. When you are doing a comparison between office-based and distributed work, and you've only ever worked in an office-based environment, it's very hard to do both. I think the people who've worked in a distributed organization and who have had a role that is either hybrid or whatever are much easier able to float over and back. But we have this situation right now, and I'm going to call it probably the dinosaur situation, where you have a lot of people who are amplifying messages that are 2015 in nature. They're even 2010 in nature, which is, you must come back to the office because why? I mean, we all understand that 2020 blew the genie out of the bottle, and we have a lot of people trying to put it back in the bottle. And the reason that it can't go back in the bottle is that an awful lot of people have seen that the very nature of work has changed. People talk less now about the workplace, and they talk about the work as in a product, an output. And that isn't going to change. So does it come down, is it culture or skills? I think it is opening yourself up to the fact that there is a slightly different skill set needed. And I think the challenge is that many people who own the megaphones have never had the experience of anything other than a command and control culture in a physical place. And there's an element of vulnerability that leadership group needs to embrace to make that shift. Now, I am not for 1 second advocating, and I never will, that everybody should be remote. But I'm also not for 1 second advocating that everybody should be in an office. And I think what we've seen is that there are certain roles and certain industries and certain departments that are tailor-made for being fully remote. And there's roles that are tailor-made and cannot be done outside of an office. And really, if you look at the research, about 50% of jobs have to be in a physical location. I get it, no problem. So I'm not advocating that everything else should be remote, but there's about 10 to 15% of jobs that can and should be done that can be done fully remote. It's this piece in the middle, the 35% or so in the middle, that we're all discussing. That's the people who are hybrid. And all the data would show that over the course of the last 3 years, that this is a group of people who've settled on about 2.5 days a week. And there's a tug of war or tug of love, whichever way you look at it, between the very senior folks who want them all to come back to the office and the employees who want to stay, who keep this level of flexibility. And anybody who tells you that it has already been decided, I think is an idiot. I think there's another 4, 6, 8 years of settling that needs to be done in that space before we eventually work out what is the new norm.
Okay. Now, we may or may not want to go down the road of this next question. But here we go. So I'm fascinated by things like, and I'm sure you must be aware of, companies like Fiverr.com. And for anybody that doesn't know what it is, it's a website where you can go on and people are distributed globally. And for starting at $5 and upwards, you can get websites designed and logos done and etc. So there we have, I wanted the cover to my book done. I wanted it laid out as a PDF. I wanted all sorts of things done for it. I went onto Fiverr.com and for a couple of $100, I got the whole thing done by somebody in the Philippines, somebody in Bangladesh, somebody in... Now, in essence, they're working from home. That's my version of a group of people working from home. So that kind of tells me that depending on how you define things, this definitely works, even for somebody who's not got an organisation. I'm now really fascinated by AI and ChatGPT, of course. And when I have gone on there and said, write a LinkedIn post about feedback. You are a university professor speaking to senior leaders, focus on emotional intelligence and give me 6 tips. And about 3.5 seconds later, wallop, there it is. And when you read it, you go, yeah, that's, that's pretty darn good. So as that accelerates, because that's as it is today, what's the reality of AI? Because, I mean, a chatbot at the moment is usually relatively rubbish.
Yep.
You know, I mean, even when the chatbot comes up, I just type real person. So I'm not even going to enter into a conversation with it.
Guilty as charged.
Exactly.
Also.
So we do that. So we know the worker, but it's going to get to that point. Mm-hmm. So what's going to happen so I've got an 8-year-old and a 10-year-old. Where's it going to, not where's AI going to be, but what's the reality of somebody in a customer service space who's going to check on your address for you and tell you if your policy's up to date or what the next, what's the reality of even having people?
I think we're always going to need, humans by nature need interaction. Okay. So, I mean, one of the biggest challenges with remote work is making sure that you continue to have those interactions and you don't lose the community itch that needs to be scratched. So that will always be the case. And I think there's always going to be a need for people to be at the other end of a phone or the other end of a line, whether it be chat or whatever, for that level of interaction. Now, the whole conversation about AI and ChatGPT, far above my pay grade. But I will share with you what my personal reaction has been since this rolled out. Scared shitless. First thing was like, oh my God. And I thought, hang on a second now. Over the course of the next 5 years, in all likelihood, we're going to see I wouldn't say a race to the bottom, but there will be people who are going to short circuit lots of things. Okay? So what I did, and I don't know if this is right or wrong, but I'm trying to do it. I do it probably 5 to 6 days a week. I have a goal of every day writing, just pulling up a blank document in Google Docs and writing 500 words. And the reason for doing that is I have a nagging belief at the back of my mind that if I don't continue to try to be creative and be and work on that skill, I may well fall down the trap of taking the easy option. So that's how I'm approaching it. Now, I believe that with ChatGPT, there's an opportunity for me to reach out and find and get a sort of the scaffolding of a story, and then I could probably adapt some of the more nuanced creativity pieces. But I am personally afraid, because I know that I'm likely to take, wouldn't say the easy option, but I could get lured in. Like I look at it through the lens of a 22 and a 19-year-old. We had a very animated discussion about it, particularly as it pertains to college courses and college exams. And there was a discussion about how quite a number of the folks in their various classes were using ChatGPT right off the bat and trying to getting it to do papers. We all know at some stage that's going to be rumbled. And what I don't want to see my kids falling into the trap of taking the easy option. So to me, I suppose I did this as a reminder to myself that the creative process is important, but also as probably an example to the rest of to my kids that like it is an important skill to carry forward into the next kind of 5 years, the actual ability to write rather than the ability to get somebody to write for you.
And do you think there's and this is a slightly unfair question, but we're grown up, so we can handle it. I've always been of the belief that the moment McDonald's can invent a machine that can take the chips out of the fryer and actually put them into the container, and when Boston Robotics come up with a robot that can do it, and they look at the actual lifelong, that's a 100-year investment in that machine with a service engineer. Actually, I think you'll end up at a McDonald's window, and all that will be in there is a service engineer.
100% agree with you.
So, even though I do have a relatively dystopian view of the future, and I think it's going to end up like Blade Runner, which is a particular point of reference, I kind of have that sense of a lot of these roles that are even now, work from home. If you were going to actually look forward, 30 years? What's the reality?
Well, I'm going to go back about 25, 30 years, first of all. And, in sort of my lifetime in business or in leadership, there have been all these times where it's like, oh, this is going to come along and it's going to take loads of jobs. It's going to do this. It's going to do that. There's all these kind of seminal moments where there's a lot of doomsday thinking. But if you actually look at it, there are more people. The unemployment rate is lower now than it was then. There are more people employed, ordinal number now than then. So what I see, and this is again way above my pay grade, but I see that we are continually reinventing the jobs and the nature of the jobs, and particularly in the first world countries, we're continuing to grow up rather than grow out. And a great example would be, VHS tapes came out. It's going to doom the cinemas. No, cinemas needed to reinvent themselves and reconstitute the size and the way they were organized into cineplexes. Good business to be in. Oh, they're going to kill the movie industry. Well, no, not necessarily kill the movie industry. It changed the movie industry. So I do believe that the changes that we're seeing now, the things that are coming out now will change the nature of what we're doing. But I think we're smart enough as a species to actually adapt and to move forward. So your example of McDonald's, if you look at what McDonald's, just as an example, a fast food chain has done, what you probably wouldn't realize is that for 25 years, I think it's about 25 years, McDonald's in the US has had people working from home answering the drive-through window questions. So you think you're talking to an individual, but in many of the McDonald's franchises, you're actually talking to somebody who is sitting in the middle of a snowstorm in Michigan, working from home, because every time they save a second or two in the processing time, they're actually making more money. And they worked out that was a significantly better way to do business. So I love that businesses are constantly looking at processes and changes. And I don't take as dystopian a view as you might, putting words in your mouth there a little bit, or reminding you of your words, shoving your words back in your mouth. I think we have an ability as a species to reinvent and actually move on.
Perfect. Thank God for that Good news. So listen, John. Let's fast forward to today. You've had a heck of a career by anybody's standards. So where are you now in terms of your legacy? Where your brain's at when you get up in the morning and to decide whether or not to stay in bed or to get up? What's the stuff that gives you that energy and that focus?
Well, the first thing I look at is what's on my calendar, and when I see that I've got a podcast with Guy Bloom, it says, hey, I'd better get up today. I joke. Since I've been out of, let's say, the general workforce for a year and a half, and I was really lucky that I brought a lot of things with me. So when I actually stepped off the treadmill, I had so much more stuff on my plate that I'm actually busier now than I was then. So the key, I suppose, the pillars for me that I brought forward were, clearly remote work and aspects of remote work, or I would prefer to refer to it as, I suppose, flexible work. That's the stuff that's constant. That's the tape that's constantly going around in my head. I can't turn that off. I can't. So I was very fortunate that I was involved very early on with an organization in Ireland called Grow Remote that actually uses remote work and distributed work to actually help communities all around Ireland and all over the world to actually to get people to work remote, and to essentially what it'll do is it'll help folks move from urban locations to more rural locations over time, and to do it in a way that's coordinated and works. So that really is the number one compartment in my head. Secondly, I got involved in an organization that helps asylum seekers and refugees who are coming into Ireland to assimilate into society. Every major country in the world has benefited from inward migration. You look at every great economy, they require, like, as an economy grows, the thing that's needed to keep the flywheel going is people. And unfortunately, we're not producing, or the birth rate isn't high enough to produce at a level that's going to keep it going. So inward migration is important. And when you have folks coming in who are displaced elsewhere, that is a really important thing, both from a humanitarian perspective to welcome folks in, but also from an economic perspective to assimilate them into organizations. So I'm part of an organization called the Sanctuary Runners, and we use something as basic, Guy, as incredibly basic as running. Everybody runs. The cost of entry is a pair of shorts, a ratty old t-shirt, and a pair of runners, and you can run, walk with somebody, and there's nothing better than doing a 5K run with somebody who has just arrived in the country and is looking to assimilate into in the country, and the two of you are heaving along the 4K of a 5K run, because it is the most democratizing and equalizing thing when you're hot and sweaty and you're chit-chatting with somebody, because you are just John talking to Muhammad. That's all it is. So I got involved in that, and that was kind of the give back, because I would have been heavily involved in sport my whole life, and then but I fundamentally believe that this is not just a humanitarian do-gooder type thing. I think it's an incredibly important thing for us to both show the communities that assimilation and integration is an essential part of the economic engine of any of the countries. So probably they're the two passion plays, but that's all well and good. Forget the passion plays for a second. I'm also involved in about 5 or 6 startups, be it at board level or advisor level. And not surprisingly, quite a number of them have very hard links to aspects like distributed work and remote work and a variety of other things. So those things, between all of those, probably 8 or 9 things, I am actually over calendared all the time. And it's great, because it would be I would hate to be in my late 50s and underutilizing, or basically being underutilized. It would be a terrible shame.
So I've got to ask, because I would read it. I would read your book.
Oh God, you are sick, man.
I know. As long as it wasn't a big book. It had pictures in it. But I would...
Do you read colouring books?
Exactly.
I could do a colouring book for you.
Exactly. You are ripe for a book.
No,
You are. You've got to trust me. You've got a book that just about, it could be it's not about my life, as in I am wonderful, but it's about from that position of wisdom around this topic of following that distributed working or that flexible working curve. My life on the curve or something. I don't know. That would be a powerful read.
No, I appreciate the comment, and maybe it might be something that I'll kind of throw into the back of my mind. But and maybe it's tied into what I said earlier on about the trying to write 500 words a day. Because when I sat down to do it, I was asked at home here, like, is that a diary or something? I'm like, no, I just sit down and whatever's top. Sometimes I write about remote work. Other times I'll write about immigration issues. Other times I'll write about shitty customer service that I got. Other times I'll write about observations. I was in New York last week. Observations on the street in New York. Just general observations. And it's just a safe place where I can be myself. The big challenge for me in terms of ever writing something and putting it out there is I like my privacy, and I don't know if I've got the guts to completely open up. And this is coming from somebody who has expounded for the last probably 10 years of their career the importance of vulnerability. And I don't know if I could just rip my heart open enough and just throw it out there. But Guy, you may be onto something. And if something ever comes of this, I'll come back to you.
Well, I want chapter 1 to be, I wish I hadn't laughed. And it just starts off with you at that football game, you see? And it just...
Baseball.
But see, that's it. Yeah, I can just see it. I offer it out there because I think... occasionally I just talk to somebody and I go, if the vibrancy of the experience manifested into the book, it would be a fantastic thing.
But I tell you, some of the mad shit that goes through my head is that,
that's chapter 2.
So, people say, oh yeah, you're all about remote work, but like, what does it really mean? And I thought, hang on a second now. Okay, more people working from home is fairly obvious. So one of the things that people are now having to deal with is they're now spending more time in their physical homes. So their energy usage is a little bit more top of mind. So therefore, the way in which they approach energy is slightly different. I see people with the light bulb going off in their head going, oh, I should have a look at solar PV because I'm going to be in the house more often. I'm going to try to be more conscious of, try to drive my bills down. But really what's actually happening is this is the type of thing that's going to help us in 15 to 20 years time. And I think we'll look back and say that one of the catalysts for us to push for more electric vehicles and better energy conservation is the more distributed our workforce is, the more conscious people will be about travel as opposed to unconsciously just getting on the tube every day and going in, whatever, and not thinking about it. So there's a thoughtful process right now to the things that we're doing that I think somebody will write in 15 years time about how the reason that we did, the reason that this happened is because, but I think somebody is going to do the classic revisionist historian thing. And I don't think that the governments and the legislative authorities in many countries are actually pushing these things enough, because I think they will be written about in 15 to 20 years time as really, really important watershed moments.
I think you see that. I think you have an acute insight, and I think you notice pivot moments, and I think you recognise them for what they are. So listen, just having you on the podcast will be educational for some people. And this topic of if people, coming through, if you said, look, if you should read one thing or listen to one podcast or, maybe there's a couple of things for people to take an interest in this idea of remote working and maybe what it means to the human condition and what it maybe means to, maybe even to the long-term kind of sustainability of an organization, whatever these topics are that you're far more versed in than I am. Where should people start looking? Because there may not be the Bible, but there might be places that people should pay attention to. Where should they look?
As a podcaster, you're probably not going to like how I'm going to respond to this, but I would say the number one place to start is data rather than commentary. There's so much commentary out there, but the most important source of data regarding all aspects of distributed work, remote work, and working from home there's an English guy called Nick Bloom, Professor Nicholas Bloom in Stanford, who's been following this for probably 15 years and wrote the major piece of research in 2013 before it became in any way kind of a trend, and has been following it. And he produces a report every month called WFHresearch.com, and it's out there. I get a copy of it in my inbox every month, and it's all it's information that has real academic rigor. It is all peer reviewed, and it's fascinating stuff, and it's light on opinion and heavy on data. To me, that's the most important starting point. The worst starting point is, Elon Musk said, or Jamie Dimon said, and you pick your CEO who's never really worked remote. Actually, on that point, here's a fun one. Most of the very senior people who head up to the mountain with their megaphone and tell you what you should be doing are folks who actually don't realize it themselves, but they are actually working in a distributed work. They're traveling on a regular basis. They're not really experiencing that, let's call it 9 to 5 in and out of an office. And many of the multinational organizations that have advanced throughout the last maybe 15 to 20 years, most of the executives of these organizations and most of the teamwork in these organizations have been working in an asynchronous manner and in a distributed manner. Yet why can't people see that? And why can't people see the benefits of that? Because the business culture has expanded so much in the last 40 to 50 years as companies have internationalized. In other words, as they've distributed their workforce around the world. So clearly they've benefited enormously from it. So just move that extra step and allow people to work from home a little bit more often, or work from a place that's not in a physical office. So that's where I would land with that.
Okay, so start with the data. Understand that. Have a bedrock of understanding and knowledge to put your opinion on. And I think I hear that quite strongly. One of the things I notice in leadership development is people that teach through the statements of others. So-and-so says, and this book says, well, yeah, but what's your opinion? What do you think about it? Yep. And that's that seems very, very, very important.
I'll give you an example. I spoke with a journalist from a major publication on last Friday, and the journalist, the first 3 questions asked were exactly as you just outlined, where the premise was, well, the recent indications are that everybody's returning to work. I said, pause a second. As a journalist, where are you getting your information here? Because let me share this data point and this data point and this data point, which would actually indicate that what you're saying is somebody's opinion that has no basis in fact. And that was repeated in the first 3 questions to the extent that I'm a sad individual, but I actually sent this particular journalist probably 5 links over the weekend of data points that would help provide them with a level of insight to hopefully present them with a level of balance. So it unnerved me a little bit that a journalist for a major publication was basing their they'd preordained what this story was, and it felt to me that they were looking for sound bites that would actually fill out the story. And I'm a great believer in the data. Go to the goddamn raw data and get it.
One of my favourite quotes is by a gentleman who I don't necessarily believe in everything he says, but he said this one fantastic thing during a town hall discussion, which is the facts don't care about your feelings.
And who said that?
Ben Shapiro. He said the facts don't care about your feelings, where somebody was arguing the toss on a certain group of the population was getting shot more than another. And he said, well, that's not actually true. Well, it is. Well, it isn't. Tell me where you've seen this. Well, that's what everybody says. Yeah, but tell me the data source.
Correct.
Because I can tell you the police statistics. I can tell you the government statistics. I can quote them right now. So I can tell you those. Yes, but that's not my lived experience. I don't really care. And that's important. Know your facts. And if you know your facts, you're in a good spot.
So if you go back to your previous question about like podcasts and whatever, and I directed you towards facts, I think the facts then will help people to lead them to podcasts that actually discuss. Like there's some great podcasts that talk about the need for empathy in the workplace. And there's a woman called Sophie Wade who does a great podcast on that. There's a ton of other podcasts out there, but it all depends on the facts will lead you to the area that you're most interested in. And then I would say go discover from a podcast perspective, go discover. There's some fascinating ones. There's plenty of bullshit out there as well, but there's a lot of fascinating ones. And I would say sift through until you find something that actually resonates with you. And then I would also say mix it up. I do believe that absolutely only listening to one voice on a consistent basis is not necessarily the right thing to do. And I love to chop and change. I listen to a smorgasbord of podcasts because it's the best way to lean in. And I actually love listening to stuff once in a blue moon that absolutely irritates the shit out of me, because if I disagree with it, I want to know why I disagree with it.
I think that's really important. Sophie Wade, Empathy Works. I had her on the podcast a little while ago, so she's fantastic. And I think you're right, actually. I think especially with social media algorithms, if you only listen to what you like, you're going to live in an ecosystem where you end up not able to tolerate any other voices. And that means that out of the 100 things that you don't agree with, there will be one out of that 100 where you go, damn it, that might be right. But if you're not willing to listen to anything, then you cut it out. So I resonate with that. So listen, I'm going to bring us to a close, not because I want to, because what I actually want to do is to kidnap you and keep you for private conversations for the next couple of weeks. But apparently that's illegal and I'm not allowed to do it anymore. So I'm going to bring us to a close. I'm going to get you to stay on just for a moment to make sure everything is loaded up. But Jon, you've been an absolute joy. You're on point. You're succinct. You're colourful in the right way, and you've got this great experience that just resonates through what you say. So for everybody listening, and for just my personal joy, thank you so much for coming on.
Many thanks. A lot of fun.
That's it. So I hope you enjoyed the episode. Please share so others get to hear about us, and subscribe so you keep up to date on new episodes. Also visit livingbrave.com if you want to connect with me and find out more about executive coaching, team effectiveness and changing culture. Oh, and of course you can buy my book Living Brave Leadership on Amazon. So on that note, see you soon.